Well, we're joined now by independent statistician Jamie Jenkins. Jamie, good afternoon to you, and I hope you're having a lovely Boxing Day. Thank you very much for joining us. So paint a picture for us. What do we understand about Omicron? How many people are sick with it, and how many people do we know have died of Omicron?
Yeah, I think that the first thing to probably focus on with Omicron is the fact that Omicron itself was firstly identified in South Africa, and this kind of what we've seen over the last kind of 2 weeks is that the cases have started coming down in South Africa. That's an important thing to point out, really. We're starting to see a bit of a turning point in Denmark as well, which is important. And so case numbers themselves won't be the important number as we move forward. And the number of patients in hospital is significantly lower at the moment than this time last year.
How does this compare with other variants such as Delta and Beta then? Because at the moment governments are reacting, some are actually reacting fairly quickly compared to other variants. What are your thoughts on that? Were we right to actually react quickly with restrictions?
Well, we've seen them coming down hospitalisations in Scotland and in Wales over the last 3 months. So I think the big concern is that we've moved into these restrictions quite quickly off the back of the Omicron variant kind of hitting society. And if you start looking at the facts and figures, the data is clearly showing now that it's completely less deadly compared to the previous variants. So we've got over 85% now of people over the age of 60 who've had 2 vaccinations and I've had a booster as well. So if you factor in all of that and the fact that we've got significant protection amongst those who are the most at risk, it's very unlikely any of these scenarios that the NHS would be overwhelmed with COVID patients is likely to come to fruition.
And how does this wave compare to the waves that have gone before?
So the cases are significantly higher. You can see that we've hit record highs now. I would imagine they're going to continue to go up. We know this is far more transmissible, but we're also testing far more people now than we were a year ago when we were going into those waves. We've probably got less cases now than what we had back at the very start of the pandemic, which was in March, because we weren't really testing at that particular point in time, because obviously testing came on board. So where we are compared to this time last year, deaths are around 85% lower than this time last year. Say patients in hospital in some parts of the country are significantly lower. The big issue you do have is that the NHS has got more non-COVID patients in, and it could be that if there is a little surge in patients, because the thing with the Omicron variant is if you get 10 times as many cases, even if you're 5 times less likely to go into hospital, you still end up with more patients going into hospital if more people catch it. But I think the important statistic is what I've pointed out there, and that is that the vast majority of people over the age of 65, who were 70% of the patients this time last year, have had a booster jab. And Pfizer and the government are saying this offers that extra protection. So when you start factoring in a less deadly variant, significant vaccine coverage among the vulnerable people, I think we should be able to ride this one out through the winter, act with a bit of caution. But I think Boris is probably in the right place now, not to rush at the moment with restrictions like some of the devolved nations have.
Yeah, for those living in England then, eyes will be looking towards the new year. Do you expect that England will see similar restrictions to that in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, do you think?
Well, obviously, you've seen the media headlines today about, if we don't have further restrictions, we're going to start overwhelming the NHS. Like I was explaining, if you start factoring in the booster for those who are most vulnerable, it's very unlikely that would happen. But, you go back before the pandemic, every year going into the winter months, you see ambulances backed up, operations being cancelled, and this was pre-COVID. So, you only need a few of those headlines to people start questioning. And ultimately, there's no prizes for not doing anything for Boris, I suppose, because, acting on the side of caution might be the way for him to go, because in the past, he's been criticised for not doing that. They've moved that way in Scotland and obviously in Wales and some parts in Northern Ireland. We've seen the Republic of Ireland introduce some strict curfews as well. I think I probably want to see a little bit more of the data. Some people would say that if you wait too long, it becomes, a bit of an issue. But we've got the information coming out of South Africa, cases starting to come back down now. They haven't introduced any strict restrictions there. They are in the summer, remember, we're hitting into our winter. I think the big issue for Boris is going to be the NHS just can't cope in a normal winter. Put this on top, I think they may decide to act and do something.
Jamie, I don't know about you, but I did find it quite interesting in the run-up to Christmas, looking at restaurants and pubs. There were lots of empty tables. People were worried about going out. There isn't a lockdown happening here, but we were seeing that people were kind of self-imposing a lockdown in some parts of the country. Is that something that you're noticing in people's behaviour as well?
Yeah, obviously, people's behaviour will be reactive in terms of what the government messaging. And I think there are a lot of people in society who, rightly or wrongly, are scared of these variants because they've seen the daily headlines of the number of people dying. I think the important thing to reiterate really is Omicron is looking less likely to be a less deadly variant when you look at all of the evidence. Acting with some caution, it makes some sense to do that but the problem you do have is, though, that a number of people have cancelled kind of their bookings. The hospitality sector, I know Richie Sunak has offered some more money in Wales now. Today, where I live, we've got rules of 6 coming in, limits in terms of what you can do when you're in venues. Some people have had big kind of bookings cancelled because they're having more family members coming around. And what happens? These people are probably all going to get together in the house anyway. It's probably not going to stop people mixing. So, I think some precautions make sense, but this could be the kind of the variant that signals the end of COVID. If it becomes more like the common cold, we'll see record case numbers. Sadly, some people will end up dying with that, but the relative risk will be significantly lower than what we've had in the past.
But talking about these restrictions in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, when you impose restrictions, there then comes a cost. So how much do you expect that this is all costing these governments at the moment?
Well, the Welsh Government have announced just £120 million to cover some of the restrictions they put on businesses. Now, unfortunately, if you're one of those businesses who is suffering, you can't actually apply for the money until January the 10th. I would imagine that's in part to do with the fact that some of the workers for the Welsh Government are probably on their Christmas break. But that's no comfort to those individuals. We've racked up a massive bill over the last kind of 18 months with the furlough scheme. I know that the devolved nations wanted a reintroduction of the furlough scheme. But unless we're going to go into that situation where we need to kind of lock down the country, we shouldn't really be heading down that road, because ultimately it's going to be, my children and our children's children who are going to have to pay the bill for all of this. The big concern does seem to be that, this might be a less deadly variant, but if more people catch it and they're having to self-isolate, some of the services might be at risk in terms of delivery there. I think that's going to be, rather than protecting, say, the NHS because people are going to get sick and end up in there, it's probably going to be more a case of protect the kind of the vital workforce. That might be one of the reasons why they do that, I think.
And Jamie, I think, the question that everyone's asking is, we're heading into a new year, 2022. When will this end? We're coming up to our 3rd year almost of this pandemic. 2022, could it be the end? Are we getting anywhere near the end of this tunnel?
Well, who would have thought, this time last year, the first kind of vaccines were starting to be administered. We had over 130 million jabs in arms later. We had Freedom Day in the summer. People would have thought we were never going to be coming back into this. We've just got to learn to live with the fact that COVID isn't going away. We're going to get different variants over time. If history is probably the best lesson we can learn from, where we had the Spanish flu pandemic about 100 years ago, they had several that way. If you look, we get the annual flu cycle because it's just partly off the back of that. So COVID isn't going to go away. This variant may be the one that helps kind of make sure that it overtakes the Delta variant. And we see now in some countries now that this variant is becoming the dominant one, which is a positive thing if it's less deadly, because fewer people catch the Delta variant and they'll catch the Omicron variant. So, I'd be surprised if we're in the same position in 2023, but who would have thought where we'd be this time last year?
It sounds hopeful though, doesn't it, Jamie? Thank you very much for your time. Thanks for joining us on your Boxing Day. Take care.